Vladimir Putin has made his first public address since the Wagner coup attempt. How is he trying to spin this event to the Russian public? And just what is going on behind the scenes? I'm Paul, U.S. Army combat veteran. Let's break it down right now. Okay. First off, I want to point something out. We've seen in fairly recent photos, Putin was looking appeared to have a very swollen face, something common in steroid use. And I don't mean performance enhancing drugs. I mean medical steroids. Let's see if we can find a comparison of just when and how he looks. Here we go. Yeah. I can always count on the mirror to have all sorts of weird, always reporting the weirdest news. Here we go. Here we go. Perfect. As you can see, this is how he looked. This is from July of last year. So just about 12 months ago. You can see he is very swollen, incredibly swollen face, appears to be struggling to stay awake. But you can see that here we are again, 12 months later, looking very, very different. I actually think that he may have had some Botox. You can see almost like something's going on with his lips here, but let's watch him speak and see if we can infer anything more about what's been going on with his appearance.
Dear friends, today I address you once again, all citizens of Russia. I'd like to thank you for your support, your patriotism, and your solidarity. This civil solidarity.
Yeah, I think he's definitely got some makeup and probably a little bit of Botox. He obviously has lost. I don't know if he's lost weight per se. He's certainly experiencing way less facial swelling, which can be a number of factors. It could be completion of a treatment for a disease. It could be, he could have had some sort of allergic reaction. It could even be some sort of, poisoning attempt from a rival that was kept under wraps. But I think something that dramatic would be really hard to hide, especially from U.S. intelligence. And since we got that little window into U.S. intelligence knowledge, U.S. intelligence has said they think he has Parkinson's and possibly cancer diagnosis. So they may be working on different treatments, different regimens, trying to find something that's going to allow him to do his job in the way he finds best and still manage his symptoms. And so it's possible he was on steroids. It caused his face to swell up. They may have changed the dosage or attempted to counteract it in some way.
Shows that any kind of blackmail is doomed to failure.
So it's what I think is really interesting is the way that Putin certainly, but I think all politicians do this, and they attempt to take control of the narrative by framing things that occurred or changing sort of the scale, right? Where they sit there and go, oh, there was this blackmail attempt, there was this coup attempt. But Russian civil society never gave in. But we all saw the same videos online where a significant portion of people seemed to not be bothered by Wagner taking over buildings and corners, and many of them seem to actually be praising Wagner, seem to be high-fiving them or taking pictures with them. It was a very bizarre turn of events. Now, admittedly, you just saw a small subset of these scenes, but what you didn't see, notably, were any scenes of Russians being angry at Wagner troops. You saw, in contrast, in Ukraine, many civilians offered their unvarnished opinion of the Russian invaders. So it was interesting that you didn't see Russian citizens calling the Wagner mercenaries out for attempting to seize power in the country. Many seem to encourage them. And yet, Putin here is talking about how civil society stood up to the blackmailers. And again, for the vast majority of people, they only know about this event through the lens of the television, through their media, through their phones. So that can be both a powerful force to send undeniable video evidence for events taking place, but it can also be used to spin the evidence in certain ways.
I repeat, there has been a tremendous coming together of society, a unification of society.
Right. Again, there's absolutely no evidence that this has occurred in Russia. And I'm sure with enough massaging of polling data or something, you could spin this, but you simply say it to make it true. And this is not exclusive to Putin. If you look at a lot of major US news outlets, they also will do the same thing. They will find, for example, they'll find a story, and then they will find a minority of people who have an opinion that the news wants to normalize. And then they will link those two things. For example, they'll also report people outraged as XYZ occurs. And it's like people are outraged by literally anything. So the fact that you've turned a tiny fraction of people into being outraged, and then you find the most reasonable ones, you give them a voice within the article, you make it so that as people learn about the event, they are told already how to what opinions to form about it. And that's what Vladimir Putin is trying to do here. He's trying to report these events to people. He's trying to contextualize them, and he's trying to tell people already how they should feel about it.
And there has been a firm support of the constitutional order. And
again, not clear to me as a sort of commentator. How would you feel if the US president went on TV and goes, guys, the country's totally unified. There is total support for the U.S. Constitution and the constitutional order, and I just wanted to assure Americans there's nothing to worry about. You would be like, why was I worried about the constitutional order? What was going on? Why did that concern me?
All the leading parties, virtually the entirety of Russian society, all of them have been united in the face of the responsibility to defend the homeland.
Oh, man. This like their ability to like reek of insecurity. This may also be, I'll acknowledge, a translation issue. Some languages, the way their culture sort of operates and speaks, they'll repeat the same points a few times. We would see it often in Pashto in Afghanistan, where you would ask a translator to translate what in English would be a compound sentence, a two idea sentence. And they would speak for a paragraph. The person would speak back. The translator would speak back. And you'd be like, what was that about? And they'd say, I just translated what you said. And then he translated it back. And I used to think that they were lying, that they were having some sidebar conversation. But now, having learned a little more, I realize that that's a feature of these languages. Oftentimes, they translate into like a sort of circuitous way. So it could be more normal and not reek of insecurity, the way being like, we're all unified. And one more time, there was no threat to the constitutional order. Everybody in society is totally together on this one, right? Like that reeks of insecurity in English. It may not in Russian.
All the necessary decisions were taken as promptly as possible in the light of this danger. The defense of the constitutional order and the lives and security of our citizens. The organizers of this rebellion cannot but understand that they will be brought to justice. Everybody understands that. This is criminal activity, which is aimed at weakening the country, and this was a colossal threat. From outside, we are threatened.
Interesting. So right now he's already promised to bring those Wagner fighters, those who committed this rebellion, to justice. I just want to put a pin in that, and we'll see if he continues to make that claim throughout this video.
However, the organizers of this rebellion have betrayed those people who were dragged into this organization. And this kind of suicide is precisely what the neo-Nazis in Kiev and the West wanted.
This is also sort of interesting that he is saying that he's going to bring those who did this to justice, but then in the next breath, the majority of the people who did this, he's giving them an out. He's saying, you were probably dragged into this. This is pretty common. This is often what sometimes law enforcement in at least the U.S. will do to people who don't have a lawyer immediately. They will sit there and say, hey, you probably didn't have agency. You were dragged into this. You were forced into this. But realistically, unless there's some sort of clear threat, that's not like a real defense. I didn't know. I didn't fully understand. I was dragged into this. My buddy convinced me it'd be a good idea. Those aren't legal defenses. And I can guarantee it's not going to buy you much rope, so to speak, with the Russian state. Certainly wouldn't, if it won't help you in a U.S. court that actually has like an independent judiciary, it's definitely not going to help you in Russia.
They wanted Russian soldiers should kill each other, that servicemen and civilians be killed, and in the final analysis that Russia should fail. But and they wanted our society to be fragmented, to be splintered. And they tried to take revenge for their failure at the front, but they slipped up. They made a mistake, especially.
Yeah, this is also another classic one. Attributing these things to the West. It is not readily apparent by any stretch that Wagner Group and Prigozhin were seen as a better alternative to the existing government in the Kremlin. Certainly, the fear of a nuclear-armed state being plunged into civil war, especially a state like Russia, where there would be a lot of challenges in securing a nuclear weapon. The West probably didn't back Prigozhin. Remember, if you want to know the West's playbook for backing these sort of events, look at like Venezuela, where the parliamentary leader attempted to force out the Venezuelan government, only to have that attempt fail. But almost as soon as he declared himself president of the country, the U.S. and other countries were offering various forms of support and recognition, not realizing that the U.S. immediately recognizing him actually damaged his credibility. But Prigozhin, the U.S. never made any support. No one in the West made any supportive statements towards Prigozhin, towards his effort. They never even alluded to him being anything resembling a legitimate government. So there's not really any evidence that Wagner was working with the West.
With regard to the special services which have maintained their oath to the country, the courage, the self-sacrifice of these organs, these bodies, have saved Russia.
Again, we're spinning a narrative here that's not at all clear. Looking at the videos, you can see Wagner being waved through checkpoints. Other than the airstrikes, it's not clear that Wagner ended up with any sort of resistance by any state security apparatus beyond them closing some roads. But again, road closures, it's not clear that did anything other than ensure Wagner had a traffic-free drive. But I think he may be just thanking them for not defecting. that would have been an option for them to simply defect to Wagner, right, to declare their support for him. But it's very hard. It's not clear that Prigozhin had the support of many of these establishment entities like the FSB, the Rosguardia, the Interior Ministry, etc.
In time, we know that the overwhelming
They saved Russia by doing nothing.
majority of the Wagner company are also patriots of Russia.
Interesting. Saying that the majority of the Wagner company are also patriots of Russia. That is a fascinating assessment to make towards people who literally just tried to overthrow your country.
They have shown
Or your
their
regime.
courage in defending Donbass and yet were encouraged to fight against their compatriots. And by turning back, they avoided further bloodshed. We have to think about the people who actually decided to make this step.
Interesting. Again, you see, he literally said, he's like, we're going to bring everyone who did this to justice, and is carving out lots and lots of political space for a large number of these fighters. This is a fascinating turn by Putin to try to preserve. It's clear that he realizes that the Russian military cannot afford to lose brigades, several brigades really, of trained combat fighters who are the only combat unit to be able to claim to have made actual battlefield gains in this conflict.
Which would have had tragic and devastating consequences for the country, for Russia as a whole. I should like to thank those commanders and soldiers of the Wagner private company who took the right decision to stop and go back and prevent bloodshed. And I urge everybody to make contact with the Ministry of Defense or go back to their homes.
This is a really interesting acknowledgement where he says, if you're in Wagner Group, you can join the MOD or you can go back to your home. We don't care. Just go home. A really interesting offer that, again, it's tough to know, right? Once you've been made as a Wagner member, you more or less would have to, I think, live anonymously. Just the fear and the knowledge that the state has that you were once willing to rebel on orders from Prigozhin, and they would see you as a liability. They'd never really believe you're loyal again. And they must know. If they signed up with the MOD, I feel Wagner Group must be virtually certain that they would be assigned to the most dangerous missions where they are the least likely to return back.
This promise will be fulfilled. I repeat, it is the choice of each of you, but it will be a choice of the warriors of Russia who have acknowledged their fault. President Lukashenko should be thanked also for his role in all this in order to achieve a peaceful resolution.
It's interesting. He very obliquely alluded to a promise he made to them, but obviously any promise he made was not public. And I feel like perhaps part of the deal that Prigozhin struck may have been that Putin publicly makes the promise that he will leave Wagner troops alone or that he will give them some sort of out. And the reason I say that is because Prigozhin understands that he needs Putin there needs to be some sort of concrete guarantee. And Putin betraying a publicly made promise will damage his reputation. And so it may be the case that he demanded Putin acknowledge that he promises X, Y, and Z. to the Wagner Group. The issue is this was so obliquely worded that it is not at all clear that a promise has been made and what the conditions of that are. Again, a public promise, it's sort of like, it's like when your dad promised you'd get ice cream as a kid. You'd sometimes get ice cream, but sometimes stuff would come up. So that's sort of like getting a promise from an authoritarian. They have all the power. A promise isn't really worth that much because public opinion isn't really what keeps Putin in power. It's like part of the formula, public satisfaction, or at least avoiding public dissatisfaction. But what keeps him in power in the medium term is his control of the state apparatus. And if someone else was to control more of the apparatus of the state, especially the military and security services, then they would run the country.
It is the patriotic duty of everyone, the patriotic feeling of everyone, which has saved us and has saved the country as a whole. Thank you.
That was a weird one. No doubt about it, guys. No cap, as the kids say. This entire thing still is incredibly bizarre. And I would be remiss not to point out that, again, I still maintain there is more to this deal than's being publicly acknowledged. Part of it is to make Prigozhin look like he has lost badly. But the real telling will be if in the next coming weeks and months you see Shoigu leave. If Shoigu gets the boot and a pro-Wagner person comes, and it's going to be like weeks, then you'll know there was more to the deal. But they can't kick him out right now because it would be too obvious that that was the deal. And Putin, because he's been humiliated by this event, he cannot acknowledge that there is some sort of, that the rebellion made any meaningful gains, that they achieved any strategic objective. Anyway, guys, if you want to know more about the national security space, right, I've launched the Strategic Sitrep. This is a newsletter where I have removed all the clickbait from national security stories. They are just the national security stories of the week that you need to know. We give you a simple summary without any sort of biasing or clickbaity languages. And then we give you a so what. We give you the context, something that's lost from a lot of other news sources. So if you're interested, go to strategicsitrep.com, enter your email to subscribe, and we will... you'll get it once a week in your inbox, and it'll give you everything you need to know. Anyway, thanks for joining me. See you in the next one.